This is a story about what happened to me and my husband about 3 years ago. We had two small children, a boy and a girl. Our son died of a bad illness. Soon after is when the story began. We had just returned from retrieving our son's ashes, which we kept in an urn atop our bedroom dresser. Earlier that evening, we had just put our infant daughter to bed and were lying in bed watching TV. Our son's urn slowly started moving from the back of the dresser to the front, then started shaking from side to side, as if he wanted out. I was very scared, as this was my first experience with actually seeing a spirit. I hid my head under the covers and told my husband to move his urn to the back of the dresser so it wouldn't fall off. I didn't think I could actually stand to have to see his ashes. My husband got up and spoke to our son. He was much braver than I was at the time, telling him it was okay and he needed to be careful not to fall off the dresser. My husband had just returned to bed when it started again. This time, he removed our son's urn and placed it on the floor. That's what started it all. For then, we heard a loud crash come from the bathroom. My husband went to investigate. Returning to me, he had found nothing broken or moved. Then the noises moved to the kitchen and then to his bedroom, as if he was still going about his play. We then realized that our son must not know that he had passed on. My husband tried speaking to him and telling him it was okay and he should go on to heaven. The noises stopped. We thought he listened to him. But then there was a knocking at the door. It was our best friend and was also our son's godmother. We sat on the living room couch and told her what had just happened. She in turn told us what we had assumed. He was too young to realize he was gone. From our friend's vantage point on the couch, she could see partially into the bathroom. We heard her gasp and then cry out. "My God," she said, "look at that." We all went into the bathroom to discover what made the loud crash that came from the bathroom earlier. There was a small handprint on the cabinet under the sink. It was just the size of our recently departed son's and looked as though he had been playing in the dirt, for it was brownish, black in color. I know that it was not there earlier, for I, my husband, and our friend had spent the few days cleaning the house, removing all his clothes and toys, giving them to our friend. That was the end of it, for the night. But it started again the very next morning. I must tell this about our son first, so you will understand what happened. Our son slept in the room on the other side of our bedroom wall. When he awoke every morning, he would play for a little, walk quietly. Then he started to get hungry. He would knock on the adjoining wall. This would wake me up. The very next morning, I was awakened by the knocking on the wall and have just woken up. I was still disoriented, got out of bed to go and tend to my son, not remembering that he was gone until opening his bedroom door to find it empty. I was not so scared this time, and I spoke to him. I told him that we loved and missed him, but that as he passed on, I could not give him his breakfast. I went back in my bedroom and woke my husband to tell him what had happened. Later that morning, I received a frantic call from our friend, telling me of the very real dream she had the night before after leaving our house. Her youngest son was only 2 months old at the time and still woke in the middle of the night for a bottle. So when she awoke to her son's cries, she just got up and went to the kitchen to heat him a bottle. She was turning the lights on as she went. As she turned the kitchen light on, there was her son standing in the middle of her kitchen. She was shocked at first, but then started to speak to him. Our son and friend were very close before he died, and went to her house frequently to play with her 3 children. She was a strong believer in the supernatural. It didn't bother her at first. A game that they used to play was my son would run around her house with a beach ball, and she would chase after him. In this dream, he had the ball and was calling to her to chase him. She went after him, calling his name. After a few minutes of chasing him, he ran into her youngest son's room and disappeared. That's when she woke up to, you may have guessed it, her son's nightly feeding. So she was very frightened, then thinking she had dreamed what was about to happen. It didn't though. It was our son's best way of telling his best friend goodbye. All that day, we heard noises, much the same as the night before, only his spirit was no longer in his urine, so it didn't move anymore. But the strangest of all was to happen to me that night while I slept. My husband and I were babysitting our friend's 3 children at her house, while she and her husband were out at a restaurant. We were in the living room with our daughter and her 2 older children playing video games. Her youngest son was taking a nap. A few minutes later, he awoke from his nap and started to cry for a bottle. So I went into his bedroom, and there, in his doorway, was my son, the exact spot that he had disappeared from in my friend's dream. I yelled for my husband to come to me. Just as my husband was coming down the hall, our son ran out of the bedroom and down the other end of the hall. When we started to walk towards him, he showed us he had the beach ball in his hands. Then he spoke, "Mama, Daddy, want to play ball?" So we all sat down in the hallway and rolled the ball back and forth. After a few minutes, he got up and went out into the living room to watch the other kids play video games. That is where my dream ended. Later in the morning, I called my friend to tell her about my dream. It was like she had the first half of the dream and I had the second. Nothing like that had ever happened to either of us before, or again. Over the next couple days, the noises continued. My husband and I felt very bad, not able to really get over our son's death because he was still with us, which was a good thing, and a bad, I guess. Our son had a little bit more time with us, but we knew we had to help him move on. We just didn't know how. Later that night, after my husband had left for work, I was home alone with our daughter. I'd just put her down to sleep. I was sitting on my bed, watching TV, when I heard a noise coming from the living room. I looked out my bedroom door and out into my kitchen. It was a very connected apartment. I saw a man standing in my kitchen. I was very scared at this because it was not my son and I had no idea who it was. Then, just as quickly, he disappeared. Then, I saw my son run by the bedroom door. I got a very cold feeling of dread. I just felt such anger coming from the kitchen and fear for my son. It looked as if my son was running from the man. That made me mad. Who was this man to scare my son, even in death? I knew that right then and there that I must do something. I called my husband and friend, and they both came to me. My friend said that we should get a Ouija board and try to contact this man and find out what his problem was with our son. So, she left, and my husband and I went to buy one. We came home and went into our son's bedroom and sat on the floor. It wasn't that long before the man came through. He explained to us that he'd been cremated right before our son, and some of his ashes had been left behind, and now were in the same urn as our son. He wanted the rest of his ashes. We told him that there was nothing we could do about it, but that we would help him and our son move on, so they could be at peace. The man explained to us that since he was trapped with some of his spirit in our house, and the rest of it elsewhere, that I would have to guide him through the Ouija board. So I did, and our son followed. That was the end of the man. But our son still comes to visit us occasionally. We feel him with us always. Losing a loved one, especially a child, is very difficult. But by our son hanging around for a while, it did help us by getting to say goodbye one last time. My mom thinks she has a ghost in her bedroom. Either her father, mother, or grandmother she feels. Her television goes on and off by itself at all hours, day or night, even when she is not in there. We will all be in the living room and hear something all of a sudden. One or two of us will go check the noise, and it's the television. It's been turned on, and the volume has been turned up loud enough to hear in the living room. She, my mom, double checks before she leaves the room to make sure the TV is off. The TV also gets turned off when she is in her room watching it, or turned off when she is in there asleep. All of us get the feeling someone is watching us sometimes. It's never a threatening feeling. It's just like someone familiar is with us. I've had a few dreams of events that have taken place within a week of the dreams also. Things like, I dreamt I was standing in our backyard, and you can see our neighbor's front yard from there. In the dream, there were about a dozen cars parked in front of their house, and people going into the house were dressed in like Sunday clothes. I went back in our house and told my mom that old lady Rogers must have died there because there were a lot of people over there. When I woke up that morning, I looked at the obituaries and there was Miss Rogers' name. I never even knew she was ill, and we all thought her husband would go first. Then, there was the dream about an airplane crashing into my aunt's truck with a parking lot full of cars, and hers was the only one that was touched. I woke up when the plane hit the truck. It was about 1:45 p.m. My mom got a call from my aunt that night. She said she had been in a wreck just before 2 p.m. that day. Weird, huh? Just wanted to share. I am from Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I am giving you information about my grandmother's house at Sunset Road. This house is directly across from a street from an old cemetery. I grew up in this house and have seen many scary things. I was about 11 years old, and I saw a man's figure appear on the side of my grandmother's bed. A very large man, and keep in mind that it seemed to look like my grandfather, who I never met. My grandmother was blind and saw him. I've heard footsteps in this house when I was the only one there. My sister saw my dead grandfather walking down the basement steps the day of his funeral. A couple of people have died in this house, and that is why I'm not surprised at all that it is haunted. Thanks for listening to my short story, and I hope you appreciated it. Okay, so here goes my story. I know it sounds really impossible to some, but either bear with me or quit reading. About 2 to 3 years ago, I lived in a very old apartment complex in Maryville, Ohio. When we first moved in there, I knew there was something very weird about it. It just didn't seem like a very happy place. My parents were in the process of a divorce, and my dad lived within walking distance. I chose the room on the left. Once you walked up the stairs, there was a staircase with a landing halfway up the stairs that you could see from my doorway. My mom's room was right on the other side of mine, and the bathroom right across the hall. Well, back to the story. So I was being babysat by my best friend's sister, and we were downstairs listening to music, and suddenly, all the lights and music went off. We figured the power had just gone out, so we just started talking. After about 10 minutes, the TV came on, and it was all static. Lately, I had been seeing a man in a black cloak run from our kitchen out the back door, and I looked over and I saw it again. Nobody in my family believed me, so I looked at Constance and asked her if she had seen that, and she said yes. So we were a bit freaked out and decided to go upstairs. At about 3 in the morning, Constance went back to sleep, and I stayed up because I could have sworn I was hearing people downstairs and that the stairs were creaking. I turned to switch the stereo on. The power had come back by this time, and I heard a voice right behind me. It was a guy's voice, and it said, "Don't scream and don't be afraid." I slowly turned around, expecting to see a guy with a rope or something, ready to tie me up, but there was nobody there. I quietly asked who was there and where they were, but nobody answered. Constance was babysitting for a week. I decided I had imagined it, so I just decided to go to bed. The next night, we were watching a cartoon in my bedroom, and I heard the same voice. I turned the TV off and asked Constance if she had heard that, and she said she heard a man talking. So I asked who was there, and they were there again. This time it answered me. It said its name was Willie, and that he wanted to be friends. He said he was sitting right beside me. I turned to look, and I couldn't see him. Will said that he was my guardian angel, so I wouldn't be able to see him. I think it was a mistake, but I agreed to be a friend, so me and Constance talked to him for the remainder of the babysitting stay. After about a month, things started to turn for the worst. I had a problem with one of my friends, and I told Willie, and he, or it, asked me if I wanted him to hurt him. And that was when I decided he wasn't very friendly and asked him to leave. That night, I had my friend that had made me angry. We made up, Spend the night as a way to say I forgive you. Well, I thought something might happen, but I took my mind off of it. At about midnight, we decided to turn the TV off and just talk until we fell asleep. I heard something on the stairs and went to look, but I couldn't see anyone. But I thought I heard my name and Willie's voice, so I went back to my room and shut my door. Right after I shut my door, I heard someone laughing, and this freaked both of us out because my mom was at the neighbor's house. I ran over and locked my door, then ran back to my bed and grabbed my baseball bat and stood by my closet, ready to hit anyone who came in. Then, my doorknob started shaking and my door rattled violently. I seriously thought I heard Willie's distinct laugh, so I hollered at him and told him to go away and never come back. Right after that, the door stopped, and we both vowed to never tell anyone who knew what happened. Of course, if we seriously considered it first, then we might tell someone. But seriously, are we nuts? Am I nuts? Thanks for reading. I wanted to tell you some of my personal experiences that happened in Randallstown, Maryland. There's a Job Corps Center on Old Court Road. It is technically considered Woodstock, Maryland. The center is called Woodstock Corps Job Center. I was a student, as well as a residential advisor, at this facility from 1995 to 1996 as a student. In 1998 to 1999, residential advisor. Anyway, this is a huge mansion-type building that currently houses up to 550 students. It used to be a monk monastery. There is a graveyard for the monks that still sits at the entrance of the center. Well, when I was a student there were a lot of strange things that would happen, but we had one that was widely known around the center. He was called the Black Monk, not because of the color of his skin, but because he had no face, and under the hood of his cloak, you could see only black. He used to walk around the center at night. If you woke up in the middle of the night and looked out your window, you would sometimes see him on the grounds. The next experience is that there is a dorm called Columbia. All the dorms are named after surrounding towns. That was the dorm that I lived in. There used to be an extension to the dorm that you could access through a door at the back of the lounge. The entrance to that part was always kept locked, on the upstairs section of the dorm. This section of Columbia burned down sometime in the 80s. When the dorm caught fire, there was a 16-year-old girl who perished in the fire. She has been seen many times in the dorm lounge. Just before I started at the center, there was a dance. This could have happened in the summer of 1995. The night of the dance, a young girl, I believe she was 16 or 17, was out on the grounds, walking to the dance. When she realized that the dance was starting, she began to run to the entrance to get to the dance. As she trotted towards the entrance, she realized that she was having trouble breathing. She was asthmatic and had forgotten her inhaler in her room. Having trouble breathing and with no one around, everyone was in the dance. She sat down on the steps to the then flagpole, now waterfall, and unfortunately perished. She was also a resident of Columbia Hall, and you could hear her wheezing walking down the hall at times during the night or when the dorm was quiet. Now, when I was a staff member there, I was placed in Columbia Hall as staff. Well, in the mornings, we used to have a check of all the rooms to make sure that the girls had cleaned their rooms, closed, and locked the lounge and laundry room, etc. One morning, while I was up there, I would always start at the far end of the dorm, checking rooms, and the laundry room was about midway down the hall, and the lounge was at the end of the hall. Anyway, I went in to check a student's room, and when I came back out of that room, I realized that the lounge room door was locked. It was open when I went into the first room, and closed when I came out. So I decided to go down and just lock it, figuring the door had just caught wind. When I went to lock it, it was already locked. This was impossible, since the door had to be locked with a key. Then, just at that moment, I heard the washing machines, all 4 of them, start up in spin mode. So, at this point, I got creeped out, and I went into the laundry room to investigate, thinking maybe one of the girls was being funny. When I got into the laundry room, there was no one in sight, and as I lifted the lids, all of the washers were half full with water. Mind you, I said that they were in spin mode. At this point, I became too creeped out to stand in, so I ran downstairs to get another staff member to come up with me until my inspection was complete. I don't know if I had some kind of gift or something, but I was not the only one to see or hear things, except that morning, no one else was with me. But there was something about that place that just seemed to draw this one out in me. I was always the one to see them and draw other people's attention to them. Since leaving there, I've not had such powerful occasions. I've had some strange things happen, feeling someone else in the room is with me, etc., but nothing this strong, and I will never forget them. Thanks for listening. I recently started a new job in a large local department store. This store has a huge basement where empty shelves are stored and overstocked items, such as large ficus trees and so on. Many employees refuse to go down there alone at night. I found out why. One evening, I went down to the basement to drop something off. There is a very long hallway between two huge rooms down there. I walked to the far room, going through the hallway. As I neared the end of the hall, I thought I heard the click-click of high heels. I turned, saw nothing, and walked on. I was standing at the counter down there doing some work and heard the sound again. I looked, and I swear, I saw what looked like to be a woman literally walking into the ficus trees and disappearing. Yes, I saw high heels. Well, I went upstairs rather quickly. After talking with many coworkers, I discovered they all had the same experience. Come to find out, the woman who used to handle the incoming trucks died suddenly about 2 years ago, and yes, she always wore high heels to work. The woman who replaced her made management move the warehouse desk upstairs, as she always felt so creepy sitting downstairs. Did the former freight manager love her job so much that she hates to leave? Who knows? I just know I've joined the ranks of, I'm not going down there by myself. In 3 months, my husband and I will have been married a year. A few months after we were married, we moved to this house here in Minneapolis, and since we have gotten here, I've never felt comfortable. My husband's best friend was kind enough to let us share this huge house with him after some of my new in-laws sold the house out from under us and kind of left us standing. Anyway, I have an extreme fear of basements, and when I say extreme, I mean extreme. Our washer and dryer are in the basement, so come time to do laundry, it took me weeks to build up the courage, telling myself you are 30 years old, grow up. So my first venture to this basement, I swallow the lump in my throat and continue on with my mission. Under our stairs, there's like a triangle place that most people leave open to store things, only on these stairs, the entire area is blocked in, like boarded up, so I tried not to notice, but my fear had me on my toes. I was alone, except for our 2 pit bulls who are larger than average, so you would think I would have no fear. As I was putting the clothes in the washer, our male pit comes downstairs and was lying on the floor beside me. While I loaded the washer as fast as I could, he suddenly gets up and goes into the spare room in the basement and starts this deep growling he only uses when he is protecting. Just like kids, you get to know their different sounds. Anyway, I looked up from what I was doing and saw something out of the corner of my eye that looked like another dog's hindquarters in the doorway to the room. In this area, we have a lot of idiots who think it is cool to fight their pits, and we have ours for family dogs, only they are loved and protected, just like children, but they know it is their job to protect us. Several people have approached us wanting to fight our dogs, and we always turn them away, so they get angry. So the first thing that comes into my mind was someone found a way to get one of these fighting pits into my house, so I panicked and grabbed the pipe beside the washer. As I went to approach the other dog, my male came bolting out of the room and straight up the stairs. I got this feeling someone was behind me, so I ran after him. When my husband got home, I told him what happened, and he finally broke down and told me there's some stories to this house, and one is for sure that right before his best friend moved in here, some idiots kept a dog on a 12-inch chain It was attached to the wall downstairs in the spare room, and sometimes our dogs seemed to see him. Then he says he might as well tell me the rest that goes with this house. Seems that back in World War II, an older lady had lived here and had fallen madly in love with this house. Her husband had been killed at war, and she was just living alone, and she had made the request to be buried with this house. I thought he was crazy, as he told me to wait, and I would see things. I'm a skeptic, and I made this clear. I was sitting on the couch one afternoon, facing the stairway, which has no windows, no reflections, no nothing. There's a window on the landing, and one at the bend, but the stairway itself has no windows. I looked up at my husband to say something, because I had just seen him walk down the stairs, and something was floating down my stairs. It wasn't a form, just a haze, just something was there. I told my husband again. After that, things have only been worse. I was sick in bed, sitting up one night, when I felt something rub my back. Thought it was my kitten, but it was not, so I sat back down, and it happened 3 more times, like someone was trying to massage my back with tiny hands. Instead of crying out to my hubby, which I do so often, I just turned on my light and fell asleep. The next morning, I told my husband, and he said something had been missing with them. He let the dogs out. When they came in, he shut and locked the door. We never leave our doors unlocked, no matter home or not. Then he sat back down in the family room to finish his show, and he felt freezing air. When he got up to check the door, it was standing wide open. I should know, to lock this door, you need a deadbolt. I said to my husband, I don't care if anything is here. I don't mind sharing a house. I just don't want to be touched again, or see anything else. Being touched by something not there is too scary. It has happened to me in my sleep, in the tub, getting ready for work, a lot of times. Since I've said that, I don't see too many things. After the thing I've seen in the dining room on all fours, I'm thankful. Now, however, I heard someone outside my bedroom door, whispering, making those noises, and a woman's voice kind of moaning like she is tired of something. There's so many things I could go on about. I just wanted to know I'm not the only one experiencing these things. Thank you for your time. When my mom was 17 and her twin brothers were 15, they lived with my great-grandma, whom I call Nanny. My nanny lives in this old house that once belonged to her mother and her mother's pet bird, who had both passed just 8 months before. Her mother because of sickness, and the bird because no one really paid any attention to it after her mom died. I must say myself that this house is weird. It is shaped like a barn, and it's 2 stories high. My mother's incident happened on the 2nd story. My mother was downstairs watching TV, while her brothers were upstairs asleep in their bunk beds. This was around 11 p.m. My nanny wasn't home yet. She had been working late. While my mother was sitting on the sofa, debating whether to go to bed or wait for Nanny, she heard a loud screech that sounded like her great-grandma's bird. She shrugged it off and got up to get a snack. From the kitchen, you can clearly see the twins' bedroom. She was walking towards the kitchen and looked up to see the twins' light on in the room and went up to investigate. When she got to the room, the light switch was flipped down, but the light was on. She flipped the switch a couple times, and the light still would not go out. About this time, she heard the TV downstairs get very loud. She ran to the stairs and looked down and didn't see anything and walked back to the twins' room. The light still had not went off, and it was still flipped down. My mother then heard her deceased great-grandmother's voice say, "Scotty, Scotty, wake up." Scotty, who was on the top bunk, then started rolling towards the side of the bunk bed, opposite of the wall where the rail should have been, but he refused to put it there. He was getting ready to roll off when my Uncle Stephen, who was on the bottom bunk bed, dead asleep, threw a body pillow from the side of him and onto the floor. Not a second later, Scotty rolled off and hit the pillow. The light went off, the TV turned down, and my mother, who nearly passed out, heard the bird screech again and heard her great-grandma say, "Calm down, Femi," the bird's name. Hello. I thought of sending a peculiar occurrence that happened to me, but I hadn't found the right place. Here goes. My grandma was diagnosed with cancer in 1996. She was treated, and we all thought she was cured. In my case, I really didn't know much about cancer, and when the doctor said that the cancer was out, I never thought it would come back. In December 1999, I was living out of town. It had been a month since I had seen my grandma, a really long time for us. I was supposed to come pick her up and take her to my house for the holidays. On the 18th, she felt sick and went to the hospital. I arrived on the 19th, and she still wanted to go back to my house for Christmas, so against what the doctor thought, she checked out. Her bladder was no longer working, and she felt weak all the way. To be fair, now that I'm writing this, it sounds that she was pretty bad already. I always thought it was going to pass. I mean, she had overcome cancer, hadn't she? I know, it was stupid of me. But anyway, after an 8-hour trip, we arrived to our destination. I had to take her to the hospital. She stayed there until the 31st, and Aunt and myself would take turns in staying with her day and night. All through this, I thought she was still okay. On the 30th, my grandma had been in a great mood. She had been joking and playing with me all day, and so when my aunt arrived, I headed home. I would arrive at home and start cleaning and preparing next day's supper. I was pretty occupied with what I was doing, and my 2 children were sleeping. As I was mopping the kitchen, the back door had a sort of mirrored glass. I was in front of this door when I felt someone walk behind me. I looked up and I saw a shadow walk by. The feeling was more intense than what I actually saw. What went through my head as I saw this shadow was the memory of my grandpa, deceased for 5 years at the time. I dropped the mop, forgot about everything, ran up the stairs, and cuddled in between my sleeping children. I would love to say that when I thought it was my grandpa, I felt at peace. I was scared, honestly. I woke up at around 6 in the morning to the smell of roses. My aunt phoned at 7 to let me know that my grandma had fallen into a coma. All this day, the smell of roses persisted, and I would smell it everywhere. She died on January 1st, 2000. She never made it out of the coma. Unfortunately, the cancer had invaded most of her organs. I know it's not really scary, but it's the only experience I could not explain logically. I've never read of anything that has to do with the smell of roses. If anyone has had a similar experience, please let me know so I can understand this better. Hi there, my name is Phil. I used to live in a bungalow in Surrey for 13 years with my parents. The property was built in 1953, and we think that it was built on an old forest. We moved there when I was 13 years old, and I'm 29 now, and I've moved out, but things still happen. My parents have now sold the property on. Anyway, when we moved in, we wasn't told that the previous owner had suddenly died in my mom's and dad's bedroom from a heart attack. We were there about 3 months before we started noticing odd things, like objects that were put in safe places we would find like elsewhere, like keys and pictures would move, strange cold areas that normally would be in the hallway, creaking floorboards at night, and strange shadows that the cat would sometimes avoid. The cat would stop dead in its tracks and not go into that room. Instead, would just sit there and stare at nothing as far as we could see. These things continued for about 3 years, but we got used to them. But we had the odd visitor refusing to go into the bathroom to wash their hands, as for some reason was never very warm, including the summer months. A chill would run down your spine, and you wouldn't like being in there for very long. I remember one morning, it was a Sunday. I was 16 at the time. I was lying in bed relaxing. Now, I was definitely awake because the TV was on and it was 7:30 a.m. I was lying on my back, just deciding whether to get up or not, when the cat jumped out of the bed at a very high speed and ran from the room. Just then, I felt this pressure on my chest as if someone was pushing down on me. I couldn't breathe that well. I couldn't shout out for help, nor could I move, as if I was paralyzed. This must have lasted for about maybe 2 minutes, then whatever it was lifted off of me. I jumped out of bed and went into the kitchen where my mom was making breakfast. She said I looked very pale and white, and when I told her what had happened, She told me that she had a similar thing happen to her, only that she felt as if someone was trying to strangle her, and at the same time, I told a friend of mine, who at the time was heavily into the paranormal, and he suggested that the person who died of a heart attack in the house was feeling something bad, and he wanted us to feel the same thing. He wanted us to feel the pain he went through, but I wasn't sure about this thought, as I think that someone or something in that house wanted us out. A few strange things happened for us the next few years, but generally it was quietish, but things started happening to me again. When I was about 20ish, I had the same experience as someone pushing down on me at the same time as before. Also, I'm sure it used to follow me about, is sometimes I would get this feeling of someone being right behind me. I then saw a dark, tall, gray-haired man standing in the hall when I came home late one night, and when I said who's there, because my mom and dad were on holiday at the time, it disappeared in front of my eyes. Naturally, I didn't stay there that night, as I was by myself. I then started seeing faces in the wall, shadows moving at night, doors blowing open, even though there wasn't any kind of wind around. So a friend of my dad's, who was a born-again Christian, brought a clergy around to move through the house and said prayers in each room. He didn't like the hall, bathroom, or my mom's and dad's bedroom whilst in this room because he had a picture thrown at him which smashed against the wall. He then left simply a bit shaken, but not sure about what quite happened. Things were bad for a while, but then got better. I stayed another 6 years in that house, but had to leave as didn't quite feel happy there. My mom and dad have now sold the property onto someone else, and naturally, we didn't inform them of the problems there. My old neighbors have said that the new owners have asked who the dark, tall, grayed hair man is, and we just say that it is the previous owner who died there, but they are not sure. I was just wondering what sort of ghosts or ghosts we had there, and why I has not found peace, and why I was not happy. Maybe you could answer these questions. I have a best friend named Mandy, and she has always said that there was a ghost named Jack that watches over her, and at the time she told me this, I was about 9 years old. I was invited to her house on a Saturday just for the day, but I ended up staying there till after dinner. She told me Jack likes to hang around in the basement of her house, and likes to open this old refrigerator, freezer door. I never thought about it until we went down to the basement to play. I felt like someone was watching me. Later, we went upstairs, and her mother told us dinner was ready, and told us we were eating outside. So before I went for dinner, I told my friend Mandy that I'll be out in a second, and she said okay, and she went out to have dinner. I forgot my toys downstairs, and I remembered when I looked downstairs, the lights were off, and the freezer door was wide open. At this time, I was thinking of whether or not I should go down there, so I just stood there for about a minute. All of a sudden, I heard someone call my name. It was like a soft whisper voice. I thought it was my friend Mandy. I knew she was outside with her parents having dinner, but I thought maybe she came back to get something. So I went downstairs. I looked all over for her, but couldn't find her anywhere. Now, I felt very scared, and I grabbed my toy and ran upstairs, thinking someone was watching every move I made. I went outside and saw my friend Mandy and her parents out there having dinner. I didn't want to bring up anything about it in front of my friend's parents. So after dinner, I told my friend Mandy what I heard and felt, and she said that it was her ghost Jack. Then she started to bring up how Jack communicates to her, and she sometimes sees him walking around down there. She doesn't seem to be startled at this, because she believes that Jack is there to watch over her. This past September, my sister and I visited this place. I've noticed it is no longer on your website. The place is truly haunted. I'm no ghost hunter, but we thought we would give it a try on our vacation. This place I'm referring to, of course, is Knoxville, Tennessee's Evil and Copper Ridge Road. When we got there, no sooner than we got out of the car and crossed the street, I was overcome with fear. We went into the graveyard and was looking around. I looked at the building and saw a glowing light. I just thought it was from a streetlight on the other side of the building, but my niece was standing beside me and never saw it. I was taking some pictures of headstones when my sister started running towards me, yelling, "Did you hear that?" I then proceeded to tell her that I didn't hear anything. So we all ran scared, and she said she even heard a dog growling. We left and went back to our motel. We got brave and decided to go back. When we got back, we went into the building and not the graveyard. This time, it was like I couldn't breathe. After a few minutes, I was okay. We walked around the outside of the building. My sister wanted to go inside, but only if one of us went with her. I said I wasn't going in there, so we ended up back in the graveyard. We start looking around again when we noticed something really strange. What we saw in the distance of the graveyard, all the way in the back, was the faint image of a black shadowy figure approaching us. I started yelling, "Run, it's going to get you." Everybody sees this thing, so we run for my car and refuse to get back out. Now, my sister, for whatever reason, wanted to get back out there and investigate, out of curiosity, I guess, but I told her not to go out there. We drove away, and that was that. I live in a small town in Texas. For as long as I can remember, everyone has told stories of our high school being haunted. Before I begin, I will give you some background info. The high school was built, I believe, in the 1920s. As the years have gone by, the school has been expanded on, but the original building is still there. It is in the part of the building that most of the weird experiences have happened. These are all stories told to me mostly by the teachers. I've never experienced anything myself. I will try to remember everything. As a side note, this all occurred in the original part of the building. On with the stories. To start with, one of the classrooms in the old building belongs to Miss P. I won't mention anyone's name for privacy reasons. She has told me that there is a cold spot in the corner of the room. She has placed a large cabinet in the corner because her students will frequently mess around there. She also told me of a time when she was picking up for summer vacation and had neatly stacked all her books up on the desk before leaving for the night. She was the only person there at the time, and she locked the room up. The next morning, she returned to her room and found all the books she had stacked open, thrown throughout the room. I've taken her class, and sometimes without warning, the mobiles on her ceiling will move, but there is no breeze to move them. Also, the smell of lemons can be smelled by everyone every once in a while. Sometimes when she has her own scented candles, of which are never lemon. The main hauntings, I guess you could say, come from the gym. For years, people have had strange things happen. About 4 summers ago, we had a teacher bring in some paranormal investigators to have a look at the high school gym. They told us that the center of energy, I guess, is located under the gym in the girls' weight room. This made sense on several occasions because the punching bag down there, which is very heavy, will swing violently on its own. Also, in pictures taken of the girls' basketball team, a white haze can be seen in the top corner of the picture near the basketball goal. I've seen this picture. My friend is a photographer for the yearbook, and in a lot of her pictures taken in the old high school, white balls called orbs can be seen floating around, and even my teacher has seen them floating around as well. Anyway, the investigators took video of the gym while they were walking around, and twice, when they crossed the gym, they were followed by a burst of light, I guess is the best way to describe it. They also left a tape recorder in the weight room during the investigation, and upon listening to it, heard voices that sounded raspy and so far off of what a usual voice would sound like. I will never forget what the voices said though. The reason we view the tape and listen to the recording is because the head of the investigation has a website that she has posted this on. They said, and I quote, "No one hears us." I just thought I would share this with you all after reading the many experiences of others on this website. I attend this high school currently. Many rumors fly around about who the ghost can be. The most reasonable is that of an old janitor who died, and also some of the high school students who were involved in a car crash. I don't know what year that was, but many people believe that they could be there as well. The investigator doesn't believe they are harmful, but she also recommended not trying to contact them as well. She believes they inhabit the gym because that used to be a high source of energy, with pep rallies, athletics, and such. That is all I know. After reading some of the stories here, I thought I would like to take this opportunity to share an experience I had back in 1992 and 93 in an apartment my friend and I were living in at the time. It was a relatively new apartment complex at the time, only 3 years old. Things were innocuous enough to begin with, so neither my friend nor I really thought anything was odd. Items of food, jewelry, or clothing would disappear and reappear frequently, days or weeks later, in strange places, other than those where they had originally belonged. We each thought the other person was misplacing these items and forgetting we'd moved them. It was quite amusing at times to open up the cupboard and find the cheese in with the dinner plates or the chicken pies in your closet. Oh, and socks used to disappear a lot. Well, usually one, but I think that was the washing machine eating them. Often, there would be a dark shape out of the corner of your eye, and when you turned to look, there was nobody there. I mean, you could feel someone there too. Laying in bed at night, I would hear the front door open and footsteps walking across the living room, and thinking it was my roommate coming in from her night out, I would call out to her and get no reply. She hadn't come home. No one was home except for me. I was woken up one night by voices whispering very close by. I thought it was someone chatting outside my bedroom window at 3 o'clock in the morning, but when I woke up more fully, I realized it was coming from my bedside radio. But the radio was not turned on. It was not even plugged in. The TV would turn on by itself. Usually when we were in bed, it would come on really loudly and startle you awake, and it wasn't even on a channel we even liked to watch. One night, my friend had volunteered to sleep in the living room on the couch because my friend and daughters were over for a visit. Another long story, and my daughters had taken her bedroom over. Lynn told me the next day that during the night, she had been woken up by the feeling of someone standing over her. She said the feeling was very intense, and at this point, she had not opened her eyes, and she just knew someone was standing over her, watching her. She at first thought it was either myself or one of my daughters, but for some reason didn't want to look. Eventually she said she had to look, and as soon as she opened her eyes, the feeling was gone, and nobody was there. My family and I were all fast asleep. Then, over a period of time, things became even more weird. We had some fresh skimmed milk in the fridge, just bought that morning from the local 7-Eleven, which was only across the parking lot of where we lived. A short time later, we went to use the milk, and it was curdled. No harm done. We took it back to the store, and they gave us another fresh carton. We took the carton, and it sounded normal, so off we trotted home for our tea. We opened up this carton to pour into our tea, and lo and behold, curdled again. I mean thick, lumpy, sludgy goo. Not weak, watery, skimmed milk. So, thinking this was just bad luck, when all we wanted was a cup of tea, we took it back again. The store clerk must have thought we were boiling it or something, but gave us another carton, and after we shook it a few times and squeezed it to try and determine if it was fresh, we took it home. But that one was curdled too. We gave up on having our cup of tea at that point. Not long after that, I awoke one morning, and my ring finger felt sore. I looked down at my hand, and my engagement ring was buckled. It wasn't a little bent, but completely buckled into a triangle shape. It had been perfectly fine when I went to bed, and my wedding ring was normal. It was extremely hard to get off of my finger, and when I did finally get it off, it wasn't not only bent, but actually broken almost completely through the gold band in 3 places. I don't know how a ring could even be broken, even if I had laid on my hands. I mean, they would only have pressed the ring into the mattress, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think that is enough pressure to bend a diamond ring. Of course, maybe hubby had bought me a ring out of a lucky bag. Never thought of that. I took it to a jeweler for repair, and he said in all his years as a jeweler, he'd never seen a ring broken like that. After having it repaired, a short time later, I somehow managed to drop 5 rings in the shower, and the only one that disappeared down the plug hole, never to be seen again, was this engagement ring. All my other rings stayed in one place. I realize none of these events are horrifying. Apart from the curdled milk, have you ever seen skim milk curdle in 2 minutes or less? But this one is the only house or living quarters that have experienced any strange occurrences like this, so I thought this was the place to share it. We do. Both my friend and I believe that there is something wrong with that apartment, as the feelings and events were getting stronger and less friendlier the longer we stayed there. Eventually, we moved out into another apartment in the same complex and never had any other things like that occur. I was often tempted to go and ask the new occupants if anything weird happened to them, but didn't want them to think we were crazy. A couple of years ago, me and my dad moved in with my new stepmom. Everything was going just fine. I just got a new horse, so everything was perfect. Well, one night, when I went to bed, everything was normal. And just so you understand the story better, I'll explain what my room looked like. I had my rat cage by my bed, and at the foot of my bed, I had my computer that I always left on. And on this night, I had an extra blankets on my computer chair. Well, I just turned off my bedside light and was staring at my screensaver until I fell asleep. But while I was staring at the computer, something seemed different. It seemed closer than usual. It seemed to be getting even closer. So I looked at the opposite wall, and it seemed to be getting closer. Then it stopped abruptly, and everything seemed to be back to normal. I just thought maybe I fell asleep. So I shook it out of my mind. Then everything seemed to be not normal again, and somehow I seemed to know what was coming, because all I could think of was to keep an eye on that door, the bedroom door. Then, a black-shaped, shadowy man came in. Well, of course I was scared. Then he walked to the side of my bed and just stood there, did nothing but stand there. He then walked back to my doorway and then turned to stare at me again. So my thought was run past him and get to my parents' room. I thought this was all a dream. So I got out of bed and started to run to my door and get past this man. Well, I wasn't able to get past this man because it felt like an invisible force field and I was frozen there, like I couldn't even move. I tried moving, but I was paralyzed. The man just stood there for about 2 minutes. Then my light turned on and my dad walked into the door and the man vanished. He asked me what was wrong and I told him about the man that was in my room. Then I asked him if he saw me paralyzed and that I couldn't move, thinking maybe it was a dream and I dreamed I walked into him. But he said no. He woke because he heard me scream, "Please, Daddy, help me, Dad, help." I can bet my life I never said that. This isn't the only time I've seen this man. When me and my family were vacationing in Mexico, I had a nightmare and my parents woke me up and brought me over to their room. This hotel room had 2 rooms and a bath to calm me down. The lights were off, of course, but they had the bedroom light on, so there wouldn't be too much light in the room, and I was sitting on their bed. Then, I looked over at a couch that was in their room, and there was a shadowy man sitting there, laughing at me. So I started screaming, because of course, I was scared, and my parents didn't know why I was screaming, but the man was still sitting there and laughing. And I was trying to point this out to my parents, but they couldn't see him. One day when my family was out, I stayed home by myself. I then started to feel a breeze, so then I went to go get a blanket, and I felt like someone was watching me. I went upstairs to my room, and I saw a really bright shadow. I got frightened, so I started running to my room, but right then, my door opened. I went inside. I saw a glare near my bed, and its image started showing up. It looked like a little girl, so I told her to leave me alone. Covering myself up, I felt a chill. I started crawling to the hallway near the steps, and it was standing right there in front of me. My parents came home right then, so they tried to open the front door, but I went to open it, but it was already unlocked. I told them what had happened. They couldn't believe what I was saying. I went to go drink some water, then I went to sleep, but I couldn't. It seemed like the little girl was watching me. I can still see her to this day, but it does not frighten me. It sometimes seems like she is talking to me. I can tell when she is there because I either get the chills or I feel as someone is touching me. I moved not too long ago, but I will always remember her. I wish I knew what she was trying to tell me or leave me alone. I will remember that forever. My family had moved into this house. The old owner, a middle-aged man, moved because of the memories. 2 years earlier, his wife had died giving childbirth. Soon after that, we moved in. My older brother decided to move back in and took the room across from mine. I hated my room. It was always cold, and I was scared to be in it by myself. I would lay on my bed and watch TV. 2 times I saw ghosts. My dad sometimes went in my brother's room to play his PlayStation, and out of the corner of my eye, in broad daylight, I would see an older man, slightly bald, wearing a white shirt, and walk into my brother's room. I thought it was my dad, but the lights didn't turn on, and my dog started to cry. Soon after, I saw a young girl walk into my brother's room. She had long, dark brown hair, and was wearing a white nightgown. We have a mirror at the end of the hall, between our rooms, and while walking down the hall a couple of times, I would see people behind me. One time, there was a very tall, skinny man standing behind me, about 10 feet, staring into the mirror. I told my mom, and she thought it was funny. She gave him the name Frank. A second time I was walking down the hall, I looked up into the mirror, and a dark figure with a flowing dress ran across the hall. Then one night, I was sleeping and was woken up by a man standing beside my bed, staring at me and breathing deeply. I was too scared to move or talk. After I fell asleep, I had a dream about the devil. I swear I felt like I was awake and something was holding me down. I couldn't even move my head. After those things happened, I wouldn't go to sleep until my brother got home. And one night, after he got home, I decided to sleep on the couch in the living room. My eyes were shut and it was dark. We have big speakers and there was a flower pot on them by the window. I heard the flower pot slide across the speaker, but was too scared to even open up my eyes. I was lying on my back with one arm under the blanket and one arm on top of the blanket. Not a minute after, I heard the flower pot move. Something grabbed my hand and squeezed it. I swung my arm out and didn't hit anything, so I quickly opened my eyes and turned on the light behind me, but nothing was there. I was so scared, I couldn't sleep for days. My brother moved out soon after, and I took his room. Ever since, I've been told in his old room, strange things stopped happening. My family moved into our LA, Orange County home about 18 years ago. So I've been here all 16 years of my life. When I was little, I always fancied my invisible friend, who I've recently called Eric. I talked to him up until I was about 5, so my parents told me. Then I stopped. When I turned 15, I started seeing things. Out of the corner of my eye, while I was on the computer, I would see a figure in black standing in the doorway to my room. My computer is in my parents' room, being they have the alternate phone line. Their door is directly down the hall from mine. You can look through my door from theirs. I would also smell odd smells, like death or some sort of fish, when none is cooking. There will also be cold spots in the same part of the downstairs hallway, where most of the activity has taken place. Occasionally, even, I will feel a hand on top of mine while I'm waiting for something, such as when my parents were yelling on the phone when they found out my mom was unable to get a much-needed surgery. Luckily for me, that's not all. There was an instance where I actually heard something. I sat in the salon, doing my homework as I normally did, I was home alone. Out of nowhere came a thud, thump, thump, repeatedly from our den. It was rhythmic and rather loud. I let it run its course, and for a moment, before becoming frustrated, I yelled, "Eric, please, I'm trying to do my homework." It stopped, and I swear, that was almost regretful sigh afterwards. I've also seen the same spirit in several places, which has led my friend to believe he's my guardian. He has startled me once at school by appearing in the doorway to our recreation room. Naturally, only I could see it, which caused me to move from the line of running freshmen who would have otherwise run into me. I'm planning to do an EVP as soon as I get an external mic for my recorder. In another story, a small home located in the suburb of Chicago houses a very strange spirit. The room I stay in while visiting my grandparents' house is across the hall from what used to be my uncle's and now deceased. Every now and then, the hanging doors in the closet will sway, even when there is no draft nor air conditioner. In the night, there will be occasional whispering. The spirit has never appeared to be malicious, which has led me to believe it is the spirit of my uncle. Though the house was built during World War II, there is no other reasonable explanation. Another story I have is a story I'm sure many people have. It begins on a warm summer day upon the Queen Mary, which is permanently docked in Long Beach, California. I was visiting with my grandparents from above story, and my parents and brother, since I've been begging to go for a long time. My grandmother and I just passed the closed-off fitness room, which my parents, brother, and grandfather had stopped at to gawk at. Gran had gone ahead a bit, so I was walking virtually alone. I descended the stairs at the end of the hall, slowly, half because I was tired, half because I was waiting for the group of four to catch up. As I went down, I felt a violent jerk on my backpack, as if someone didn't want me to progress any further. I turned immediately, believing it was my brother being a jerk. There was no one there. As we left, I turned back to the boat to take a final snapshot before departing, knowing it would be a long time before I'd see it again. On the highest point of the boat, closed off to the public, I saw a woman in white with dark hair, her dress blowing in the wind. I thought it was an employee until I looked again, and there was nothing there, and no door through which she could have gone through. Now this last story, I'll refer to as Purple and Gold. Luckily for me, this has only happened today, so the details are easy to remember. Of course, every ghost researching person, serious or phony, in this country has heard of the Whaley House, the most haunted house in the United States, whose residents include the playful Yankee Jim and Anna Whaley, whose lavender perfume can occasionally be smelled by visitors and employees alike. I had gone upstairs long before my family did, eager to view the house I had heard so much about. There were only a few of us upstairs at the time, one woman and 3 men, only one of which was wearing any kind of body spray. I sniffed as I passed them. Don't ask why. Impulse, I suppose. Which was Axe, worn by one of the men. I entered the room, which had once been a playhouse, and froze in my tracks. The unmistakable smell of lather perfume hung in the air for a moment, then disappeared. This happened in several points in the house, which can also be confirmed by my mother, who later smelled it in a different area. We also witnessed a moving curtain, which I checked for a draft. There wasn't any. No one had been in the room for a while either. I would have seen them, being I was in the room when the curtain started moving. And those are all my stories. I've wrote to you before about my other experiences. I've one about a haunted house a friend of mine lived in a few years back. A bunch of us used to hang out there. He had a lot of bonfires over the summer. The first time I'd ever went there was a few months after he had moved in. I was dating his best friend, and he told me that he thought it was haunted. I in turn did not believe him at first. Then things happened. We were in the kitchen, and all of a sudden, we heard something from the basement, like someone was using a broomstick and hitting the ceiling from the basement. I laughed at first and asked who was down there. Then I saw the look on my friend's face. He was terrified and suggested we go outdoors for a while. While we're outside, I asked what was going on. He said that was the ghost's way of letting him know he was annoyed, so he leaves the premises for a while. I still was skeptical until I looked up and could see into the front door, and standing there in his living room was this old guy who was somewhat glowing. I almost hightailed it out of there when they decided it was safe to go in. I told them I was leaving, and they insisted I go back in, so I did. I then asked my friend if he had ever seen this ghost before, and he said no. I described to him what he looked like, and he looked into the previous owners of the house. Well, it turns out there was a guy who died in that house who looked like the same man I described. I freaked after that, as well as my friend. Things were going good at first. Like every time my friend came back home from work, he would announce himself, and the guy never bothered him anymore. There was always this room upstairs that every time you walked by it, you could feel a cold draft from the door, and it was locked. We never thought anything of it, till the man started to get mad. There were many more parties going on because of the summer. Well, the man seemed to not like the parties, and he started showing himself to me and my friend. I knew he was getting mad, and things got bad when he started attacking my friend at night. He would wake up to slashes across his back. We checked into the history more, and found out that the man was not friendly when he was alive, and worse when he was dead. It did not take long for my friend to move. The beatings were worse by the time he left. Although he never attacked me, I always feel threatened by him. I would wake up to him right in my face, and he would disappear when I would scream. I still think about the horrors that man would do to anyone, and how my friend survived actually being attacked by a ghost. Sometimes I still have dreams about this man, and how he chases people out of the house. To this day, the house is still empty. My name is Billy, and I would like to share a supernatural story of mine. Although my story does not have a physical contact, seeing a ghost, there was definitely something supernatural in the house. It was a few years ago, back in 2001 or 2002 I believe, in Mississauga, Ontario. Mississauga is a fast-growing suburb just outside of Toronto. The place in question was your very typical haunted house on top of a hill surrounded by vast land, which in turn was surrounded by industrial and commercial land. The house was deserted, only of its occupants, as its remains lay trapped behind boarded windows. I know it sounds silly, but that is exactly what it was. That looming house on the hill that every kid stared at as there were parents that drove by. I was one of those kids who, while in the backseat of my parents' car, stared silently at the house as we drove by. But it was more than just the stereotypical view of the house that captured me. There was something there, something odd that pulled me in. It was not until a few years later that I had the guts to go to the house. I'd moved away from Mississauga to Toronto, but I never forgot the house. I'd always told myself that I would go back, alone, and take photographs of the house. So one day, I grabbed my camera and I headed back to the house. It was early spring, and the leaves have yet to grow on the trees. The house had the most scary driveway I'd ever seen, probably the length of 2 to 3 football fields, and that is no joke. Now, from what I know, the house remained deserted and the land untouched by commercialists. I guess sometime, someone managed to get inside because the roof was burnt completely off. Most of the window boardings were torn down, and the insides of the room were completely overturned and damaged. From the beer cans all over the place, there must have been a party. The property around the house was littered with about 3 to 4 sheds and about 4 to 5 old rusted cars and scraps all over the ground. I forgot to mention that for some reason, I decided to go in the house in the evening, dusk to be precise. I had less than an hour to take photographs before darkness settled in. So, I entered the house from the back because it was the only part of the house with an open door. The floor was littered with papers, overturned chairs, and a lot of other rubble. I took some photos in the entrance and made my way inside. I went into the room that was the furthest into this part of the house. The first floor had 2 sections of the house that could not be reached from inside. This room had an overturned couch, a fireplace, and a littered floor. This room gave me very strong thoughts about entering it. I don't know what it was, but there was something that felt like I wasn't supposed to be there. But I entered, and I stood at the far right corner behind the couch and aimed my camera towards the fireplace. The light on my camera flickered on and off rapidly, and my camera refused to take the photo. I tried and tried, but my camera would not take it. Instead, I stood there and watched as the room went from total darkness to light as the camera flickered on and off. Afraid of what might appear, I left the room and stood looking into it from beyond. From there, I went to the upstairs to where a previous fire left the entire floor naked to the sky. This is where I noticed something odd. The house's main floor, as I've said before, was divided into two parts. Neither could be reached from inside the main floor. You either had to leave the house, go around, and enter through another door, or, as I just had learned, you had to go upstairs, cross over to the other side, and take another set of stairs down. Unfortunately, the stairs that led to the other side of the house was blocked by fallen timber, but this layout of the house was very, very odd. It did not make any sense. So, I went back downstairs and went around to the other side of the house to enter. I found an open window and pulled myself up onto the ledge. I froze right on the spot, staring deep into this part of the house. I have no idea what it was, but something was telling me to stay the hell away from the house. I felt this deep fear, this huge warning of not to enter this part of the house. So I pulled myself back down and walked away. Now, here's the interesting part. I've dreamt much of this house before I had gone to visit it. In my dreams, there was another entrance to the house, or another part of the house, a tunnel carved into the house from the ground. As I walked away, I saw it, about 50 feet from the house. 5 feet down the portal of it, cemented there, lay another path wide enough to crawl through that pointed to the house. Now, you can believe this or not, everything I've said is true. Just thought you would like to hear it. In the late 1970s, I attended college in New York State, around the Finger Lakes. The building I described was first built in the 1890s. Since we were in the middle of the first oil crisis, students who remained on campus spent the short winter term in the old main dorm to conserve energy. As it happened, some friends and I were assigned a large, empty room on the top floor. It was 4 floors up and one below the attic, and one end slanted along the roofline. The room had been primarily used for storage. The gloomy winter sun had a hard time shining through the one ice-upped window facing the lake. Dark as it was, we cheerfully shoved a desk to one side and slept on the floor to give us more room. We were having a good time camping out and weren't inclined to do much schoolwork until our papers were due. After 3 weeks or so, a winter storm was approaching, so we decided to stock up on necessities and have a little party just amongst ourselves. I'd like to say that we were all sober as judges and went to bed early after saying our prayers. However, it being the late 70s, we indulged in smoke and alcohol. We had the stereo up loud, but the music couldn't completely cover the growing sound of the wind. Our window was frosted up, and a tree branch scratched the glass. Every now and then, someone wondered whether we'd be snowed in. Someone said we would at least be able to get down on the tree. Eventually, we turned in. Unsurprisingly, that night, I had a very spooky dream. A woman hovered over me and was trying to say something to me. God knows I tried to understand her, but her fluid outlines and vivid colors made me feel a bit queasy. I woke up, certain she was still in the room. I saw nothing, just the shadow of the tree limb swaying outside. Too much party, I thought to myself, and went back to sleep. We were quiet the next morning. I suppose it was due to too much of a good thing the night before. The snowdrifts were impressive, as the wind had been so wicked, but the sun was out, and the sky was clear, and the snow was pristine. It was so much different than the storm that I felt up to sharing my spooky dream. It seems that 2 of the others had strange dreams as well. Since we all dreamed different things, I was certain nothing occult had happened. I was very relieved, since we still had 3 weeks to live in that room. Being a Florida girl, I was still curious about snow still and wanted to have a look around. I dragged a willing soul with me, and we make a quick trek around the yard. Finally, I wanted to see about our tree. My companion was bitching about the cold, and she ran into my back. When she saw why I had stopped, she said, "Son of a gun." You may have guessed by now that there was no branch, no tree, no vegetation within 15 yards of our window, and nothing was 4 stories high. We dug in the snow a bit to see whether it had fallen. Nope, no trunk, no hidden limbs in the snow. We ran up to the room to look out and make certain we had the right window. When we heated off the frost with a hairdryer and we looked down and saw nothing but our tracks, every one of us marched back down to try and find our tree. Nothing. We went back upstairs and talked a bit to get over the shock. We were all skittish, but managed to sleep in the room, but with our mattresses shoved much closer together. After that, we never mentioned much. Why bother? There was no rational explanation. I'm just glad I wasn't the only witness. That would have been crazy making. Hi, I live in the United Kingdom and have had a few ghostly experiences. My first was when I was about 7 or 8, just after my dog had passed away. He used to sit with me at the top of the stairs when I was younger, as if to protect me from falling down. He would let me be till I made it all the way up or down. After he was gone, I used to sit on the same top stair, pining for my best friend. One evening, I watched as a cat walked from the dining room door, which was open, through the living room door, which was shut. This wasn't the only time I met the cat. I always slept with the door shut to my bedroom, but felt a cat pat and paw its way to getting comfortable on my bed. I also remember it purring as well. We did have a cat at the time, so I thought it was her. I reached down to stroke what I thought was my cat. Instead, there was a small indent in my mattress. When I turned the light on, there was nothing there. My door was still shut, and my cat wasn't in the room. During my teens a few times, I woke to find my light on and television turned on. This stopped when I moved out of the family home while I went to college. I suppose more disturbingly is what has been happening to me for the last few years. In 3 different properties I've lived in, my bed has been shaken. The first couple of times it happened, I was really scared, but have gotten used to it now and have accepted it. If I had the courage, I would ask it what it wants, but it's never hurt me, and I believe it is there just to let me know it's looking out for me. Whenever it has happened, it is usually when I've been upset. It happened after I broke up with my ex-girlfriend, for example. I lived in a small, cramped apartment in a building that was built in the 1940s in Kokomo, Indiana. I've heard several ghost stories from my friends and whatnot, but I'd never taken any of them to heart until I saw firsthand a ghost in my very own house. I had never truly felt at ease in my own apartment. It had always seemed as though something else had resided besides my boyfriend and I. What got me thinking was the fact that whenever I opened the front door, I saw a faint shadow of a person walk into the kitchen, which was to the left. Lighting can create that, but no matter if the light source were emitting from the right, left, behind me, or even not at all, I always saw a faint shadow of a person walk into the kitchen. I really never thought much more than it being a light trick, though I was creeped out that I saw a shadow, even though there would be no light at all. After a while, I rarely noticed it. Things changed on January 19th, 2004. I was on my computer in my living room. To the left of me was a walk-in closet. We always kept the doors to the closet open. I was the only one home. It was nighttime, and the lights were on in the house. I stared at the screen, not paying attention to anything else, when the lighting in the room changed and got dimmer. It repeated this for a few seconds, and I chalked it up to the snowstorm outside. A few minutes go by, and then, to my left, I see what appeared to be a person outside my field of vision. I wear glasses, so I don't see way off to the side too well. Anyway, I turned my head, and I saw, as clear as anyone could ever see, a young man walk straight into my closet, and then disappear. I remember exactly what he had looked like. About 6 feet tall, short, straight blonde hair. He never looked over at me. I only saw him from the side as he disappeared into my closet. Strange, I know, and I could not make sense of it either. I was so scared that I immediately jumped up from my chair and drove to my mother's house, where I stayed for a couple of days. Later on, after I had moved out a month later, I found out from my landlord that the last resident was a young man who had committed suicide by hanging himself with a noose in the walk-in closet. I wonder to this day, why did I see him? What was the purpose? I don't know if I'll ever know, but I've been both fascinated and frightened by my experience, and from the day it has happened, it has always captivated me. Hey everybody, it's PhantomOfDarkness here. I'm going to make this really quick, but before I do that, I'm going to give you guys the quickest announcement ever. I'm leaving right now. Good night, good morning, I love you. No, I'm just kidding, guys. Hope you guys love the video. Obviously compilation. Go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, share. I don't know how well this compilation is going to do. I never do. I know you guys love the compilations because they're so long, but I'm not the biggest fan of them. I prefer, absolutely new content, fresh content, but this allows me to get my content out to new viewers who may have not seen my channel before and they want to get a taste of what I do. And, you guys know how it is. But anyway, guys, hope you guys have your undies in a bunch. And I don't know why I'm saying that. Hope you guys love yourself, because I love myself too. And you have to if you want to have high self-esteem. So anyway, guys, good night, good morning. I'll see you in the next video. Love you very much. Bye-bye. 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 Okay, I'm just going to... I really need to quit it. Quit it. Quit it, Phantom. Quit it. Quit it. Quidditch.